Welcome back for another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, Jack Green, joined as always by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it over first to Spartan Grown.
Thank you, Jack. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word, no spaces, or you can just shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com or russ@gmlarmy.com, and I can help you with your growing or lighting questions. I don't know if that made sense, but I think it was close.
Good enough for what we need, at least. And always happy to have you back. And next up, we got Brandon Rust.
What's going on? It's been a minute since I've been on the show. Nice to see you guys again. You can find me on Instagram at rust.brandon, and also the Bokashi page got zapped. So the new page there is full FUL crop CROP.sciences.
It's a bummer when the pages get taken down, and it seems like this time you said it's not going to be coming back up, unfortunately, because they got the full shebang. But you can always build back and start fresh. And without further ado, I want to welcome in Noah the Grower.
Yeah, how's it going, everybody? Sorry I missed last week, grandpa duties, but I'm Noah D. Grow on Instagram, all one word. You can find me there and happy to be here.
We are happy to have you back. And today I figured it's been a long time, but maybe tonight would be a good time to talk a little bit about both not a this versus that kind of thing, but sort of the pros and the cons of different grow media. So whether it's deep water culture, so your media is water, or whether it's coco coir, or whether it's rock wool, or whether it's a modified grow mix like a peat or a cocoa base, whether it's sand, silt, and clay based soil like you might see at Yellow Skunk Farm or the Soil Horizons type of growers out there. So I think most of us on the panel are at this point in soils, but I think all of us have experience across multiple grow media. And I figure it'd be fun to kind of touch on a lot of the different options because new growers are joining us all the time and there's lots of different options out there. And I think there's probably a dozen different ways or more to grow really dank cannabis in probably at least a half dozen different grow media, from water to perlite to rock wool and all the different stuff in between. So I think maybe we'll just pick one and kind of go through and give some of the brief, because I think we're most familiar with it. We could start with soil, and I think a lot of us will have positive things to say about it, but maybe we could think about some of the drawbacks, especially for like newer growers or inexperienced people that might have some of the challenges coming in and getting started. So with that in consideration, I'll pass it over maybe to Spartan Grown, and maybe you could highlight some of the high points and the positives of growing in like a what we do is kind of more of a modified growing mix, like a peat-based soil, and maybe some of the drawbacks that you've come across in your years using that grow medium.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that distinction too, because there's a huge difference from growing in soil outside in the native soil, maybe, and then growing in a pot of any soil, honestly. So that's a huge difference for me. Like outdoor soil, it's almost automatic. Like I do very little. Maybe I'm blessed that all of the soils in Michigan that I've grown in have been completely perfect for cannabis. I know cannabis doesn't require huge amounts, but I have done plenty of grow with zero inputs outdoor, very many of them, and with great results. Whereas it's not as I can't say the same for indoor. I've got to add to that. So, and the reason that is, I think in soils, I look at soil as the battery for instead of watering the nutrients in, the soil or the media that you're in is kind of holding all those nutrients. So you need a larger volume, kind of. If you want to give a plant all its nutrients of its whole life and in its media, if it's stored there, that's one thing. Or if you if you're feeding nutrients, you can get away with a lot smaller space. So I think with soil, the biggest thing is make sure that you're using a big enough pot to support the plant that you want at the end. That's the hardest thing to figure out as a grower, I think. That and watering, like with soil, it's really easy to overwater, whereas in other medias, it's not so easy. So those, I guess, would be the drawbacks to me, and maybe even yield because of that. You can't push tons of water through soil like you can some other medias, which could hurt yield because of that. But I mean, I get good quality cannabis, and I'm very happy with it. And that's kind of the positive end of it is for me. It's it makes it easy because all the nutrition's stored in it. It's not really lacking anything. I'm just putting water on it. I'm not even having to pH the water. Um, and the plant's just kind of doing its own thing. So huge benefit, ease of I don't know, use, maybe you want to call it, whatever. But and you can in soils generally, if you get a good enough media to support a big plant, that amount of media usually is good to be water good with water for several days, at least 1 or 2 days without having to water, which could really be nice if you're managing a garden, not having to be in there every day to water. So I guess those are some of the advantages and positives that come to my mind right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think another way of phrasing maybe needing more root spaces, they don't do well with small amounts of root space. So if you have a bunch of smaller pots and you're trying to run kind of like a sea of green style, I think modified growing mixes or soils might not be as beneficial if you're going to do that maybe Brandon style in like a bed where you're multi-planting plants in a tighter spacing. But I've seen people in cocoa grow in 1 gallon pots or even smaller, like solo cups, and be able to fill out seas of green easily. Where if you did that with soil or modified grow mix without watering in lots of like and made all that stuff throughout the whole cycle, I don't think you would get anywhere near the performance you're going to see in a cocoa. So that's one of the drawbacks for sure. Ease of use is certainly one of the reasons I've gone to it. I like just water only, and that I think getting into the cocoa section later and some of the other hydro feeding methodologies is the needing to pH, needing to remember what order the things go into the water. Uh, how do I store it? And how, it can be as simple as an AB. There's some veg ABs out there, but then there's a lot of side additives. Do you use yucca? Do you use silica or this or that? There's a lot of different things to consider when looking at different media. But that's why I kind of highlight some of the pros and some of the cons because along with the difficulty of watering, I would say not so much IPM issue, but it is sort of an IPM issue. You'll see fungus gnats, I think, more in soil probably than any other media because people have a really hard time not overwatering it. I think it's or keeping it too waterlogged for too long. Maybe it's not enough drainage or enough aeration, enough airflow, or light or heat and humidity. All that stuff isn't quite balanced yet. And so oftentimes you'll see fungus gnats in soil grows where it's not so common in other things, but I will say I've seen it in cocoa and other things as well. But I'm going to pass it over next to Brandon, who has done a lot of work in soil and modified growing mix and different media as well. I know you said you started back in the hydro days, so I'm curious what your thoughts are on soil before we get to some of the other media or modified growing mixes like Spartan, myself, and many others are growing with indoors.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to mention was that peat versus cocoa in a potting soil or a modified growing mix, the uh, the peat is going to hold on to water a lot better than the cocoa. So if you're using a peat base, it might retain moisture a little bit better. But if you're going for, more of a dry back on your soil and you want that soil to dry up a little bit, I would go with the cocoa. Another thing to remember is that the peat base mix is going to be more acidic than the cocoa. And so when the plant is taking up cations from that soil, it will naturally acidify over time. But the real thing about the way that these modified growing mixes work, they work more like a hydro system than they do traditional soil. And the reason why is because if you look at conventional soil, you have about 45% lithosphere, which is the mineral component, all the parent apatite material, which is solubilized through microbial and environmental weathering to liberate those nutrients. And you will have about 5% biosphere in that soil, and then 25% atmosphere, 25% hydrosphere. In a modified growing mix, the ratio between the lithosphere and the biosphere are switched up. So in a modified growing mix, you have about 45% biosphere and only 5% lithosphere, which is the mineral component. And so the solubility of things like your base cations, calcium, magnesium, potassium, they become more readily available. So what you'll see is you'll see a higher ppm of total nutrient solution when you're watering. So if you were to look at the nutrients that are in that water when you water, they're typically much, much higher than what you would see in an outdoor soil. And that's due to the biological component of those medias where it's super high and you have a lot of different bacteria and microbes cycling things all the time. And you have a much lower, it's basically a higher amount of energy because you have more carbon. While an outdoor agronomic soil has less carbon. And so those processes aren't happening as quickly and they're not liberating as much nutrients typically, unless you're, um, adding a lot of, unless you're adding fertilizers to those soils.
I do like the comparison between the soils and a modified growing mix, but speaking maybe more specifically to the modified growing mix, what do you think some of the drawbacks would be with that? Maybe having to cycle more microbes or have a more microbial active or a better dialing in on the mineral content because there's slightly less of it. You have to have um, it's more bioavailable, but you want to have it more in the proper ratios than maybe you could get away with agronomically outdoors.
So the real trick to really dialing in a system in one of these modified mixes is to have proper nutrient ratios and I mean proper nutrient availability and also proper balance amongst those. Just like in an agronomic soil, the majority of your soluble ions are your base cations, calcium, potassium, magnesium. And you want to really make sure that you're addressing those nutrient ions in a modified growing mix. And so when it comes to any type of media, the reason why I use modified growing mix is because it makes the most logistical sense as far as, you might spend a little bit more upfront, but you reuse it constantly. You don't have to throw it out. I feel like it holds more water than other types of media, so you can water less. And again, if you know how to balance your soil, you can basically preload everything up like I do in my garden, and then just kind of do things like additives, like microbial inoculants, some humate fertilizer every once in a while. My last run, I didn't even use any humates. I did water only and microbes. And you can see how big those freaking monsters got. I mean, they were huge. And here's another thing too. I only ran at peak 352 watts of light over those beds. So, you know, if you do things properly, you can dial it in. It's going to give you fantastic results, but it might be more of a learning curve as opposed because here's the thing. There's a difference between somebody who bakes um off of, out of a cookbook and a chef, right? Anybody can follow a
Where your grandma's cookies, who's done it for her whole life and she just makes the fucking dankest cookie no matter what.
yeah,
She's got the recipe down.
Or what if
like
you bake out of a bong?
and even if you were to take grandma's recipe, you don't have grandma's experience, right? So she might be doing something
100%.
different that you might not even notice that's not in the recipe,
In
you
between the
know?
lines. That shit is so that like the SOPs can only cover so much. Like as
Yeah,
much as we try to write down every little thing, you could film every little thing.
yeah.
There is shit in between the lines of those SOPs. It says to water at this time, to clean at this time, to pluck leaves at this time, to plant at this time, to transplant at this time. But
But the
there's other
but the
things that you can't
not
judge.
a approach either because everybody's system is a little bit different. So you can't just have one recipe for for everything. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
so many
bagel
different.
makers and stuff find that out when they go like from New York to California. Like the fucking atmosphere is a little different. The water is a little different. The shit just tastes different. Like whiskey makers move down the road even, and their whiskey starts tasting different in a different factory. So it's crazy just how much the tiny little thing, like even microbial content that you might underestimate, actually plays a role in that. So I want to jump back just a little bit because you were talking about water retention being a benefit of a modified grow mix. I also like the low costs, low input costs. I do agree with you. It's often pitched as a really simple solution, although it can become a more complex one, especially if you are trying to reuse it run after run. It involves testing and balancing things. But do you prefer cocoa or I say, do you prefer peat over cocoa in a modified growing mix because it has better water retention then? So you have to water a little bit less, and then essentially your input costs are driven down slightly.
No, I prefer peat because peat is more acidic. When I'm adding things like Microbe Plus, it's going to help solubilize micronutrients, and also it's going to help keep the media from having too high of a pH when I'm adding like calcium amendments into the bed. That might have an effect on, or potassium when I'm, watering in potassium humate and flour, right? That it's not going to have any negative impact. Um, I mean, just overall, man, I like the peat best. Plus, I can still do dry backs. It's all about your environment. You know what I mean? The
You're preaching to
beds
the
are
choir. I love peat and I dry back pretty frequently. So I think it's a valuable tool. And I think peat is, for all the shit it gets, is not as bad as people sometimes paint it to be. So I'm a peat supporter. I use the same couple bags of peat for several years. So if somebody wants to come at me for not being like environmentally conscious, it's like I use the same exact one and harvested
yeah.
20 different grows out of it. So how much
Well,
more conscious can you get?
and here's the thing, though. Uh, most peat harvesting is regulated, and so they're only allowed to take so much, and then they have to do restoration so that those bogs still grow, so that in 20 or 30 or 40 years they can be harvested again. So it is highly regulated.
I
uh,
specifically use Canadian because they have a lot of regulations and they do try to do it in a way so that because they don't want to ruin their own industry. It's like if loggers cut down their entire forest at one time, they wouldn't have any, wood or paper or whatever for the next year. They have to do it strategically. And just like the peat bogs, all this stuff is done with sustainability in mind and long term. They don't want to shoot themselves in the foot. It's a business. And it'd be kind of like if you had a gold mine that replenished itself, but if you take all of it, it never came back. So it's sort of the way that I look at it. And so I'm thankful that there are people that are doing it the right way. And I think the Canadian Sphagnum peat is one of the higher quality ones just in terms of what comes out. I've never had a bad experience with any of that product
yeah.
from like big box stores to farm store, whatever, to wherever you can get it from. I
And and then when you're comparing it to, let's say, the production of cocoa, so there's good and bad production, but it's more widespread and it's also a waste product. So the problem with that cocoa fiber is that if it's not properly processed, it's going to bring in things like sodium, right? So a good a good cocoa is usually washed and buffered. So what they're doing is they're rinsing out any of the impurities out of it, and then they're buffering it with something like calcium and magnesium to help push out any sodium out of that. So that way, when you get it, it's both pH balanced and it offers a little bit of that extra calcium and magnesium um, that you may not be getting from the salt-based nutrients.
It's a good point. And I will say that there is definitely some bad sources of peat out there in terms of where you can get it from. So I do think it's worth investigating where your source is from and paying extra a little bit for buffered peat will save you a lot of time, or not buffered peat, buffered cocoa will save you a lot of time and effort. Having grown in cocoa and used the buffered stuff, I do think it starts you off on the right foot. And I will say I love cocoa. This isn't like a peat versus cocoa or whatever. This is a we're all growing and there's a bunch of different ways to do it. So I like to celebrate all of them. So,
Well, I'll use a cocoa based media if I'm doing something like a sub irrigated planter or if I'm doing like auto pots because that media is more porous and does offer a little more um, gas and water exchange.
I just go like, funny enough, off of one of your, uh, not my base, but like you made a recipe on YouTube years ago on like how to make your own soil. And you
Mhm.
actually recommended the highest percentage of aeration of anybody I'd seen before. I think it was like 35 to 40%, where like a lot of people said like a third, a third, a third. So that was like +2 to 7% above what like Clackamas Coot or Subcool and others that I'd looked through their soil recipes had recommended. So I
Yeah.
tried it. And
And
that little
you'll
extra aeration in the earth box smashed. Like I just added more rice hulls and a little bit extra pumice, and my plants started yielding better. I was able to cycle through a little bit more water, um, regular, like they just seemed to uptake it better. Just everything about it being that level, just smashed it out. Even in the sip, like I get that there's definitely cocoa would benefit as well if you did a modified grow mix with cocoa in a sip or a city picker or Autopot. But I love my earth boxes and they crush it with peat. So if you're using peat out there, don't be afraid to try the earth boxes or city pickers because I've seen it absolutely
And
rock shit.
peat and cocoa function the same, are very, very similar. There's only a couple of like differences between using them. But I will tell you this: there's a tariff on India, and that's where most of the cocoa comes from. And so the prices of imported cocoa are gonna you're gonna start seeing a great increase in the price. So
That
large
happens.
might switch to other means.
And just another reason to become more familiar with, like, I know Eagle grows in cocoa, but he gets like the thicker chips, and then those chips eventually break down, and he could still use it even until it gets to basically a powder, and he eventually cycles and rinse it out. But you can be sustainable and reuse both media. So I think as much as we can, from a cost benefit, like the cheap home grow perspective, it's just great to reuse it. But it's also going to prevent you from running into, because costs are always going up, whether it's a tariff, whether it's inflation, whether it's something else. There's always going to be, if you bought it last year, it's going to cost more next year. So just get used to it, and you'll probably get less. The shrinkflation is also a thing. Thankfully, a lot of times, like soil is like sold by 2 cubic feet or 1 cubic foot or whatever it is. So um, there's not so much shrinkflation in that because I have to put it right on the bag how much you're getting. And so I think we've definitely talked to Brandon and I, and Spartan have talked good about positives and negatives of the modified grow mix or like indoor style soils. And Noah, I know you've definitely grown a lot with like Fox Farms and different, even newer soil. The Bio, I think 365, I can't remember. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the pros and cons of growing in kind of these indoor soil mixes.
Yeah, I love it. I've grown in quite a few different soils. I've done all of the whole, the all the Fox Farm line quite a few times. I've done a lot of stuff from like the local Kroger's, like Black Gold is actually what I started on. And it really, I mean, if water retention is what you're looking for, then I would recommend that over like the Fox Farm stuff. It dries out a little bit faster, which I enjoy because I'm trying to get my plants to uptake water and nutrients. But yeah, I mean, the Bio 365 that has like their own special blend of like biochar in it. So it really helps with like microbes and like different things like that. It helps retain moisture a little bit because it does have a little bit of peat. It has a little bit of cocoa in it. It's kind of a mixture of everything. It's actually my favorite. And they went up big time. I know that I got a pallet of it, went through that pallet, called them back up, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we there's no way you can get that deal no more." But yeah, it just it whatever your personal preference is, I mean, and like I prefer something that's going to uptake nutrients and water faster. That way, I have a little bit more control over it. But I mean, I could definitely see if you were like, growing outside or something like that, you wanted to be able to have like, or you're going like on a trip, and there's little things you can do to help with that too. So, but it just is all kind of a personal preference thing, in my opinion.
Seems like you've been enjoying the Bio 365, still growing the dank. All the photos are still
Love
coming
it.
out looking solid. And yeah, that's the thing with when you buy a pallet, especially, you have it for quite a while. And then the next time you go to try buy that pallet, it's definitely going to be a little bit pricier. I will say, even just like one bag, thinking about it, what I could do in just one grow, not even hell if I re-amend it. And I saw somebody say I'm on my 11th run of Build a Soil 3.0. That's one that I haven't tried, but it looks like a good one. And I've seen across the board people have great results with. And shout out to Jeremy from Build a Soil. He does a lot of great work. But I use the Michigan made mix, the M3, and I can get at least a pound out of my first run in that soil. So, when we break down the cost, it's like whatever that bag of soil costs, I'm definitely, at least in my opinion, getting more back in value out of that pound of good quality cannabis. And I do want to take a second to welcome in the American one who just joined us and let them know we're talking a little bit about different media tonight and the pros and cons. We've all went around and talked about like modified growing mixes, not technically a soil because it's not sand, silt, and clay like you'd find outdoors, like Leighton would talk about, but talking more about like, cocoa or peat-based soils that you would, buy a bag of and grow some cannabis inside with. So welcome in, Tao. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that topic. Do you have any pros or cons for growing in that kind of modified grow mix?
Hello, Jack, everyone in chat and everyone on panel. Yeah, I guess I got some thoughts. For a long time I used Pro Mix and Advanced Nutrients back in the day, and that worked out fine. but as you were saying, when I got here a little while ago that you could reuse your stuff. So I never really use cocoa ever. I use peat because I use peat moss as my bedding in my earthworm bin. So and I have gotten a bale pro mix, which since I moved, but if what I really like to do is get the pumice from Builder Soil, but it sucks if you're on the East Coast because it costs so much to get it. But in any case, that's like perlite that lasts forever. So you could
Buy once, cry
as
once. I've still got a bag of that shit.
yeah, dude, it's legit. And yeah, my they're like basically earthworm castings and that pumice rock is like perfect for a medium. But um and over the years I've tried to, use a bit of everything, and the Roots Organic actually is really good for starts, but it doesn't last very long nutrient wise.
They want you
But
to shell
that's
out for
that
that
yeah,
bag of
there's so many
nutrients or the
things.
tea or whatever else they sell.
It seems like that bag is almost like half perlite, and I think that's part of why it is really good and why it sucks so bad that it disappears with the nutrients so quick because there's not a lot of room for nutrients if it's half like perlite.
I was saying earlier before you came
But
in that I liked Brandon's recipe because it had so much aeration, and I do think that there's a benefit to that. But if it was pumice and like rice hulls, I do like 35% pumice and like 5% rice hulls because I figure if that 5% gets eaten up over
right
that run,
then,
then I can just replace them the next run, and the
right, and it adds a
33%
little.
pumice is still there,
That's a
and
good
it makes
idea.
my calculation easy. I just kind of throw a few handfuls of rice hulls in each run as they get eaten up by the soil.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a cheap source of silica too, so that's nice.
yeah.
And it's a great top dress. In my opinion, it's my favorite mulch for pots or even earth boxes because it's cheap, it's effective, and it just works. It works damn well in my experience. So um, I've seen people do it at big nurseries from like Wonderland Nursery used to use it, and lots of other places. So it's a effective one for organic growers out there. I just reordered a bag of it from shout out to Build a Soil. Got my paraboiled, I think is what they call them, rice hulls, like a 50-pound bag or something. And I was just using it even on my little solo cups, little seedlings that are all sprouting up. So got some Vortex going, the Project V, got some Moon Fog and some forget what the other one, Granny Candies. So gonna have some fun, some fems and stuff going there. But Noah, I wanted to ask, did you mention any drawbacks that you found with like Bio 365 or any other similar soils?
What's funny is I was just sitting here listening to Tao. I used Pro Mix too back in the day. I've used it a lot of different things. Yeah, there's going to be drawbacks to all of it. I will say that if anything, I think the Bio 365 dries out a little too much sometimes, quickly. But I mean, I'm on it. I like to feed my plants. You know what I mean? Probably 5 to 6 times a week. I mean, obviously, all you guys know, but maybe the listeners don't understand that overwatering is a very common mistake that a lot of newer growers make, and the fact that it dries out kind of lends to that. And then like I'll be like, you know what I mean? Like I'll if I know a plant, this certain plant or this certain strain only likes to uptake like maybe a quarter to a third of a gallon a day. I kind of will only give it a third or a quarter just so that I can have more control over it. So if like I'm seeing that it's a nutrient deficient in something, that way I can just feed it. So it's like it kind of speeds it up. But I mean, so for me, it's ideal. But I mean, like, yeah, if you were like my buddy who grows the absolute chronic, um, he doesn't like to water his plants but every 2 or 3 days. So Bio 3, and I gave him a bag of Bio 365, and he's like, the first thing he said was it dries out too fast. So it's all personal preference. But yeah, like I said, my buddy who showed me actually how to grow pot, 16 years ago, he didn't like it because he doesn't want to have to go into his grow tent more than like 3 times a week. So
So I
I would
think
add
it sounds like it's still good stuff. I would just mix more like heavy organic material, like a
oh, it's
worm
compost.
awesome.
casting.
Worm castings would be perfect.
Water
Make it
retention
happier.
slows
Yeah.
down how often it muddies it up a little bit.
You can
But
throw
if
a little
your
more
goal is to slow
vermiculite
down
if you wanted to. You could do vermiculite, which will actually hold water too. Um,
underused, and I think it also has silica. The
yeah.
vermiculite has a lot of benefits. I've seen people sprout seeds in like pure vermiculite, something wheatgrass I bought a while back to grow for my cats. It came with vermiculite as a base to sprout the seeds in.
It just
So
holds that water.
there
Yeah.
is a very interesting stuff. Tao, did you mention any drawbacks for the modified growing mixes or growing in like soils indoors that you found or come across so far?
No, but definitely over time, the stuff will get broken down more and more. So yeah, I guess I did have one issue at one point where I was reusing it, and yeah, like even the perlite wasn't. I don't know if it grinded down to nothing or if it just got like clogged. But yeah, my soil got pretty compact at one point.
Something I
So
like to do to prevent that with like the earth boxes or city pickers, instead of just like snipping out the plant or whatever from the stem, when I go to transplant in, I'll go like with like a full 2 gallon. The easy swap pots I use are about, it says 1 gallon, but it's really 2 gallons of soil compared to like every other uh, pot that I've come across. And that amount of soil coming out allows me to go in with like a fairly fresh batch each time. But definitely if you start to notice that, I think underrated is you'll see them out in people's yards and stuff like aeration. People wear like these boots with things that stick in the ground, or they'll run some sort of uh, lawn equipment over there that pulls these plugs out of the ground if it gets too waterlogged. That'll save their entire lawn from getting flooded and die. So instead of having to replant the entire lawn, they just have these kind of plugs all over the ground for a few days. But I think that's a win versus kind of fucking up the soil and losing the entire lawn in that case. But in cannabis's case, if you do have super waterlogged soil, there was like an actual flood in their hometown and their outdoor plants were underneath like water for I think it was 18 hours or something. And I recommended they get like a power drill out and one of those like augers and just auger some holes around the soil. And they did it like 6 to 8 inches deep, a few inches out from the base of each plant. And that allowed a little bit of airflow to the plant. All their plants survived, where pretty much every other one of the plants that weren't cannabis that they didn't care as much about got flooded and died. So allowing it to have that root space and in a smaller container, you could use like I'm in solo cups right now. I have little barbecue skewers, like the little shish kebab, whatever. And I'll use them sometimes just to support the plant to keep it upright if they're getting a little bit wobbly. But if your soil in a solo cup is compacted, you can use that and stick it in and kind of make a little aeration spots to just help break up any of those little pockets that are a little bit too tight, too much water and moisture. But ideally, you want to try and find or make a soil that has a good enough mix. That's why I think like building your own or finding one that has instead of perlite, the pumice from the base will save you that headache and time because the perlite is eventually going to get smashed or float to the top. So it's like a lose-lose with perlite. If you're going to plan to reuse, it's going to be a clock. So I would say if you do use a perlite-based soil, pull it all the way out of the pot, which I generally don't recommend. I like no-till style or low-till. But with that case, I would pull it all the way out when you re-amend it, throw it onto a tarp, bust it up, mix it all over the floor, and then add in some pumice or something that's going to stick around. But I think we've definitely covered the modified growing mix side of things pretty well. And I do want to get more into cocoa, but from a hydro focus. I think pretty much all of us here have used some sort of nutrient line at one time or another. And cocoa is kind of, I'd say, the main one at this point that I'm seeing the most of. I'm not seeing as much rock wool these days. I'm not seeing as much of the other things like deep water culture. Not to say that they don't exist. I've seen them at scale on both of those fronts. But I just think to go from most to least popular, I think we'll start with cocoa. And I'm curious, Spartan Grown, I know you've done it at the commercial scale, and I think you've also done it at home. What are your thoughts of pros and cons growing in cocoa?
Pros and cons, I think, and the reason why it is so popular at the commercial scale, especially, is repeatability. You're taking control of the nutrition of the plant and giving it, whatever you select every time. And that could really get you repeatable results. So if you get we were talking about SOPs earlier, if you get an SOP down where you're repeating everything, I know these are living plants and there's going to be some variability in environment and all that, but you can get fairly consistent results that you can count on and maybe plan a business around. Say I can get X amount of harvest or whatever that because you have such control. Um, and I also think you can, if you have a gardener that knows what they're doing, you can crop steer with nutrition. You can push plants to beyond what they would naturally do. Um, Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but mostly for the better if you know what you're doing. and manage drybacks and all the science of growing, and you can really get great results. That's hard to do. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's extremely hard to do on the organic side of things. Um, and so that's one big benefit of it, I think. And two is if you're trying to look for a situation where you have to run as close to sterile as possible, that really hurts you on the organic side of things, but on synthetic side of things, that helps because it's going to help you. Hopefully, the idea is to pass microbial testing at the end. So the idea is if you eliminate all the microbes, that you'll be okay. So and if that's the goal, I wouldn't even attempt that microbially. I mean microbially with organics. And I'm only saying that because that's essentially what that's essentially what you're counting on is some microbes to help break down nutrition for you. I know it's not literally spraying it on the plants, but that's an organic solution with good microbes that you should be able to do. So without getting into the debate there, those I think are the big benefits for me. Is like if it's like a business thing, it's not like a hobbyist, it's not like a garden thing. I really do think, and I like to even grow that way in a hobbyist setting. I like to grow all different ways. But but I think and then another thing is if you're worried about a small container for the roots, in a 1 gallon pot with nutrition, synthetic nutrition, you can get some pretty impressive results. Something that might traditionally looking on the organic traditional grow might be like you can get a 5 gallon result in 1 gallon. That's not unheard of easily um, with synthetics. So I think those are all of those reasons that I keep thinking I'm taking all the good reasons before anybody else gets to talk, which is unfair. Make me last next time.
All good. It's honestly, I think everybody has their own different perspectives, but there are a lot of benefits for sure. I'm just thankful that nobody's coming into my home grow anytime to test. I don't really give a fuck what my microbials are, but I get from a perspective of a business. And if you want to scale up to that perspective, and make it into a business, then there's benefit to having a ability to grow in a more sterile environment. So that is one of the benefits of cocoa for sure. Um, Even when I was growing at home in cocoa, I didn't care about my microbial levels that much as a beauty. Being a home grower is just, I will say, every grow I grew in cocoa was fire because I had a very good nutrient system and I dialed it in. After one grow, it was like, all right, I figured this out and I figured out my environment and nailed it. Like
And then just
I have
repeat
this
it.
little,
Then you just have to
yeah,
repeat it, and that's it. Yeah. And
I
that's the
wrote
other good
everything
thing is
down
if you
too.
make a mistake, it's really easy to fix it because you can basically essentially change out what you have going on in the root zone fairly quickly because there's not a huge danger of overwatering in cocoa. And you can just mix up the right mix and flush it through that fucking plant until it's full of the right shit. And then within a day, you're gonna start seeing improvement. That's another cool thing is like improving or trying to improve things that do go wrong. I feel like it's a lot faster to do with synthetic nutrition than it is with organic nutrition because a lot of times you're waiting for that shit to break down, even though there is some plant available solutions for sure, like Brandon's from Bokashi Earthworks, the humate fertilizers. I love those. Those are my
I
oh
would say
shit. Yeah, that's my oh shit thing.
even
I keep them
his
on the shelf just for like, oh shit, I need to address something quick. Bam, I got an N humate, I got something in the middle, or I got a K humate. I love it.
I feel like even the amino N plus acts pretty fast, especially if you like foliar it on or water it in. I've been very happy with that. Micro Plus is another one that on the organic side can kind of snap things into shape pretty fast. Uh, I feel like I'm being a Bokashi Earthwork shill, and it's not just because Brandon's back. I'm always fucking kind of raving over these products because they've made my garden better, easier to run, and higher quality. So um, right now, I have seedlings, and I mentioned I kind of fried Spartan's Project V's, and I gave them some of that amino N plus, and now they're looking. All the new leaves that are coming out are green and happy and healthy, so they're back on the right track. So I'm looking forward to hopefully finding some females in there of the three. Hopefully, at least one as a female is my hope or my goal. So looking forward to that. But in cocoa, similar things happened in the past to me. Like Spartan mentioned, when things get out of whack. I went on vacation once. My plant sitter gave them water, water, water. I came back. I foliated them. I got the proper nutrition to them, and they greened back up within a few days. So it's amazing how quick they can snap back. But Brandon, what do you think about just in terms of like um, using cocoa for medium in terms of feeding it with hydro instead of from a modified grow mix perspective? Positives and negatives there.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I've done it in the past. I've used cocoa. And like you guys said, if you guys need to flush your root zone out, it's much easier to correct issues within the media than it is in soil. But for me, I think that the 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 cons outweigh the pros, which is the logistics behind what you're doing. Um, you know, when you're using a salt-based fertilizer, you have a very low use efficiency. So you're, wasting most of it. Um, but cocoa itself as a substrate, I mean, like, I think Spartan pretty much nailed it as far as, controllability. If you are running, your own nutrient line or your own regiment, you can correct things really easily. You can flush it easier. You don't really have to worry about overwatering because it dries quickly.
All good benefits for sure. Um, I guess some of the negatives you were saying is it doesn't retain much of its nutrition. Any other drawbacks that you would think of when it comes to cocoa?
Well, when you're thinking about cocoa, typically people are using it and then just tossing it out. So from a logistic standpoint, it's kind of a waste of money as opposed to soil, right? I've had the same soil in my beds since I put them in there almost 3 years ago, and I run them back every single run. I use, you know, not like change worth of amendments, like I'm like maybe a couple of dollars worth of amendments each round. Um, so again, when you're talking about the cost efficiency of cocoa, it has again, it's all about the logistics. Where's it sourced from? How far did it travel? How much did you have to pay? Are you going to throw it out? How much nutrients are you going to need to put through there? How much more water are you going to use in that system? When you break it down from a complete logistics standpoint, there's no other system uh, than what we're doing with the modified growing mixes that are as efficient.
Yeah,
From a cost
if you think about
perspective,
just
that's
like
why I
say, if you're gonna say I'm gonna reuse it, well, look at the difference between reusing soil and reusing cocoa. Reusing soil, you're like, all right, let's put a hole and put the new pot in there and just jam it in, good to go, re-amend.
And I'm
Cocoa,
not
you gotta wash it, rebuffer it, fucking maybe, maybe sift it to
buy a
get
whole
this.
nother set of bottles for the next round.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you can't reuse soil, but if you're going to reuse soil, it's going to be more labor intensive because typically people aren't doing no-till, uh, cocoa where they're just replanting in it, like maybe doing a soil test to make sure their sodium levels aren't high or whatever. But if they are reusing it, it's like, okay, they're removing those pots, they're dumping it into a pile, they're adding a little more cow mag or whatever, blending it back up, and
Yeah, I think
then
it's a bulk operation. They dump everything, re-amend and wash everything, and then they start fresh. I will say there are some affordable options in terms of nutrient inputs, in terms of salts, like the salts that are actual salts. If you're buying a bottle that's like 90% water and like 1 to 10% salt, depending on the NPK values and needs, that's gonna be
I
more
would
expensive than Jack's 321 or some other.
a liquid based like fertilizers that are salt derived. It doesn't make sense logistically. Again, it goes back to the logistics. Okay, let's take any advanced nutrient product. Okay, you're looking at least 90% to like 96% is usually water. Okay, if you get a product that has diammonium phosphate, magnesium sulfate, and potassium uh, phosphate in it, okay, well, why don't you just buy those? You can buy those in bulk for like, a bag of a 50-pound bag of calcium nitrate costs like $12. You know what I
You
mean?
just be able to
Like,
spend that on one bottle of a lot of the different nutrient lines, if not more than that. So
yeah. So, I mean, yeah, they may be inexpensive, but then when you actually look at the efficiency of those salt bases, the reason why they're so inefficient is because when those nutrient ions are liberated in water, they're highly reactive and they can bind with other molecules, they can cause precipitation reactions, or and the majority of that solution, of the nutrients themselves, probably around 80 to 85% isn't recaptured. The plant isn't taking it up. It's ending up as waste. So
Runoff.
yeah,
That's
I
what I
just
see with a conventional farm, so much runoff in the waters around it, unfortunately. But it is I would say one of the things that makes it more difficult, that is one of the things that drove me away, was having to do the exact specific order every time. I think it's like you got to put the silica in the water the night before. You got to, add this first. You got to the pH at the very end. You try and figure it out. And some recipes will make it if you like add one drop of the pH up or the pH down, it just skyrockets like to the wrong direction. And it can be very difficult trying to sort of, and some people are much more chemistry type focused, and they'll have their little nutrients mix in with a little mag stir on a heat plate or something, get it to the right temperature, and having it all mix in just right. But I'm certainly not that type of person, unfortunately. And so it was always sort of a chore for me to like make sure, all right, I would line up all of my things in the right order that they're supposed to go in the water. So that way I would just physically go from one to the next to the next. And then after I did one, I would like put it away. So that I wouldn't double up any of the things, because this sounds probably stupid to some of you more type A's out there, but uh, if you're not the most organized or focused, you might be a little stoned, might be a little dabbed up. And if you double up on some of those things or put them in the wrong order, like Brandon was talking about, it will make the efficiency even worse than it could already be when it's done properly.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you're doing all these things right. And if you're not doing them right, it can certainly have some drawbacks.
yeah.
So those are some of my cautionary tales, at least for the cocoa. But I'll give it over to Tao next to maybe gives us some thoughts on positives or negatives in cocoa if you've ever grown in that media.
Oh, you just froze up. What am I giving my thoughts on?
Cocoa as a media,
Oh,
positives,
oh,
negatives.
I never really used it. So my thoughts are what everybody else just told me. And apparently it is really good if you want to have a quick rinse and reset and yeah, correct an issue. So that's definitely good because like I told the story, I did that one top dress. It was a pretty decent sized plant. That's why I was top dressing it. Thought it needed some extra and like 2 days after I top dressed it, it started going down and I killed the bitch from that top dress. Definitely. There's nothing else that changed though. And all the other babies were happy as hell. So yeah, in that respect, there's definite benefits to other forms of cultivation, but I believe like many, if you get it right with organic nutrients, it's definitely some of the best you can get. So I stand by that.
Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And you found a system that works for you, so I respect that. Noah, have you ever tried out the cocoa side of things?
Yeah, I have, but it was in the beginning and it was a long time ago. I don't feel comfortable like acting like I'm an expert on it. I try to avoid things that I'm not experienced in. But I would just go with like what Tao said. What most people say, and uh, I just kind of go with that. But I'm team soil myself, and that's probably the way it's going to stay for a while. But I have actually been considering just doing it just to kind of have that tool to where if people are asking advice on it, I'll have more experience. Just like like just do like a light of it. But it's just, man, it's so hard when you've done as much practice and you know nitpicking and tried to get to where your setup is as bright as it is. It's hard to kind of deviate from it. It's almost like when you don't know how to go like armless on a bike, just like letting go of the steering wheel. So it's a tough practice to go away from when you have you're doing it pretty good. So
I think a way of putting it, because like riding a bike, there's a lot of things that you need to coordinate well to do it properly. And if you let go of one of the main controls, then you can bust your grow or bust your ass pretty fast. So good notes there. And I always respect, uh, even, you know, a lot of times people will look back and be, oh, I hate X, Y, or Z video, because their very first grow, they tried it and it sucked. And they don't have experience. So of course it might suck, because if they didn't have good guidance from somebody like maybe on this panel or in this crowd, or anybody out there who knows how to grow good dank cannabis, they may have had many who tried to grow an unsuccessful experience. And they might think, well, this media sucks, whether it was soil or cocoa or any of these others that many of us have grown dank in. But once they get more experience, I think it's worth revisiting And speaking of revisiting, I know media that Spartan Grown and I have both grown with in the past, and I think found some success in, was the deep water culture. So I'm going to pass it over to Spartan and maybe ask your thoughts because I don't think too many on the panel have grown in that as well. So we'll just get your quick take on some pros and cons and general thoughts of your experience time with the DWC.
I always had great luck with DWC. I love it. I got the cheap little just one plant buckets too. I've never tried the RDWC. I'd love to maybe one day run one of those. That would be pretty cool. The biggest drawback for me, and probably in a lot of grower situations, is managing heat in the water itself. If you don't have a water chiller, which are extremely expensive, it's really hard to manage and get those water temperatures down and keep them down. You don't want to get too hot of water temperatures because then you're going to start breeding bacteria and things like that. Sometimes people will mitigate that with like pool shock or things to try to keep things sterile, but it's better just to keep things colder. You know, if you can get to that 68 degrees or even 70 degrees, that's pretty good. Um, but the plants seem to always, like what we were saying, like with the step from soil to cocoa, how it's kind of extreme to the size of the pot that you need. It's kind of similar. You just basically need enough like to hold the physical roots. And in some systems, the roots get so big that you can even have to root prune and cut some because they start to fill the container and block some plumbing or whatever. So, but in fact, I'm actually getting ready. I got a clone right now, and the clone it's rooted. I'm just trying to get the roots bigger because that's my intention to start up at least one plant in a DWC because I've got samples of some Grandmaster nutrients, and so I want to try them in the DWC and see how they do. And so, what's better than free nutrients, right? So that's what's a good one to try with that. And we'll see how it goes. But we're coming close to we're rounding the corner in the summer where we're getting out of the hot temperatures, and hopefully it'll be cooler temperatures. And I always run the DWC when I do run it in the wintertime because the colder temperatures really help a lot with the water. A lot, a lot.
That is definitely nice. Being in Ohio, winter was a lot easier. Our chillers did a lot less work. I was doing it in the mid 2000s when cannabis was going for 6 or 7 thousand a pound in the Cleveland area. So we had chillers for every one of our reservoirs, and there was a lot of lights. It was HPS. It was hot as fuck in there, but that water was always a breezy 68 degrees. If it ever did get a little bit slimy, we use a pretty cheap commercial product actually. We tried out the cheap home grow. It's called Pond Zyme. And I know there's Hygrozyme and all these other things, but if it's good enough to get shit like the slime out of a pond, it's good enough to get the slime out of your reservoir. So we always had crystal clear white roots. They were at 68 degrees year round, and we had good air conditioning as well. But we had, the money coming in to pay for uh, generators to power the entire grow and operation. So um, back then when that kind of money is coming in, it makes things a lot easier to justify. But nowadays, I think chillers might have come down a little bit. And everybody I've seen who grows with the DWC who has a chiller, it's just like makes things so much easier. And I never had the situation where power went out because we had our own generation of power. So we never worried about having our pumps not have oxygen going to them because it's like, well, we've got gas generators operating in a separate area of the home that are operating the entire grow. So it was extremely productive, extremely successful. We had the Blue Lab Truncheon. I'm not sponsored, but holy shit, that thing is awesome. It tells you the pH and the ppm like that. And there's like a little blue light that comes on, and it was very accurate.
Thing
And
is cool.
man, when you when costs aren't really a thing, and you can get the best of the best equipment, the pumps and the ours was an RDWC system, and man, like you said, we have to trim back the roots. That was one of the only problems is sometimes the roots would get so full in the buckets that it would block up the hoses to the next system. So, and I've seen other people do it even better. Like I think it's called Altitude or Attitude Ranch or something. They have their entire buckets full, like they pull it out and it's just like a rectangle and it's just like a brick of roots. And the plants, like the stalks are as thick as my forearm at the base. They're growing so fast. It's insane. They have to use like bowl cutters to chop them at the end. And when they pull out the roots, I think they donate them to people who make salves because they're so clean and they just have a shit ton of roots. And pretty proud of what DWC can do when it's dialed in. And it is sort of like I think the Ferrari or Lambo or whatever Bugatti high end of the hydro, where I think it can get the fastest, most rapid growth if you dial everything in terms of comparing it to other hydros, because it's got such a good air to water ratio, the nutrient element ratio. If you dial it in, things are really just cranking. You're going full out, and I think there's a reason a lot of people use it for a long time in the gray or black or illicit unregulated markets, because it, from a production point, holy cow. I mean, talk about pumping out. We were doing 2 a light, but this was back in the 600 watt days. The 600 watt HPS, you get 2 pounds of light when it's 6 to 7 thousand a pound. You're doing pretty good. So
And
it
don't
was
forget the
good
stealth
times
factor
there.
of it,
But
because when you're done with your harvest and you're not throwing out soil blocks, you're not throwing out cocoa blocks, you got nothing. You just got water you're dumping. You might have some roots
and going
that
back to sterility,
yeah, you might have roots
it's
to get
easy to
rid
keep
of, but
clean.
like you said, there's outlets for roots. So that gives me an idea.
People want them at this
I
point.
should take some roots. I'm gonna do that with this DWC Pro. I'm gonna save the roots and dry them and throw them in with the extract them and throw them in with the RSO. That's a good idea.
Be interesting. I know that there's sometimes even terpenes found in the roots, but they have somebody Tal might
And
be able
some
to
unique
remember this, but I
cannabinoids
think it was,
that are only found there, I believe.
yeah, there was some pink stuff I think that was extracted from a root. I think maybe was it Utah who sent it to Indra, the guy who like discovered VHO or whatever, and he extracted
Yeah,
something and
yeah. He said there was some. I don't know if it was an alkaloid. I forget what he said, but yeah, I sent him like 10 pounds of freaking roots that I had saved up. Yeah,
it's wild, man. There's I think the plant from root to leaf to bud to even the stalk, like every single part of cannabis is useful when you get down to it. You can
yeah,
find
yeah.
some use for the fiber, for the I think there's a lot of medicine in the leaf that people underlook, from eating it to baking with it to turning it into salves. Like there's a lot of cannabinoids even on early veg leaves that are just not the quote desirable ones.
Yeah, they
But
were talking on Hash Church today about some study that THCA, like eating the raw cannabis, is actually exponentially better. I think it was for inflammation. I forget exactly what it was
that
for,
has been shown in lab.
but yeah, that the acid version of THC is way better and more effective for a whole bunch of things.
That's why I eat a little leaf every day. I pluck whenever I'm
Yeah,
plucking them. I'll eat a few of them.
I tell you guys, I eat the popcorn nugs all the time. When I'm cleaning
But
up, like lollipopping a little, I'll chew them right up, eat them down.
that's why I don't worry too much if I decarb or don't decarb my RSO, because it gets decarbed a little bit in the process. And if I don't decarb it, oh damn, then I got a bunch of THCA. That's still medicinal.
Win-win. Both have the
Yeah.
benefit for sure. That's two keys being unlocked, plus all the other terpenes and cannabinoids in there. So certainly lots of benefits to that. And getting back on the medium side of things, has anybody here grown in rock wool, pure rock wool?
No, I've taken a clone out of a rock, a rooted clone in rock world, stuck in soil, and it did just fine.
Yeah, I've done that a bunch of times.
Yeah, me
I
too.
one year after lugging Pro Mix back into the woods 1/2 mile, I was in the grow shop and they had the like a bag of these baby cubes. It actually looked like croutons of Rockwool. And I'm like, damn, I could carry like 5 of those. It weighs the same as one bale of Pro Mix. So one year I actually brought some of that shit out into the woods and used it as an amendment. I didn't use it straight up, but I added it to make volume. So yeah, that's definitely a good time tested media for sure.
I've seen it do very well for everything from seeds to clones to people growing it. There's like entire um I think Jungle Boys runs it, but there's a few different places. Like they have probes that you can stick in there. It tells you your EC and your water level. It tells you how much you can dry it back. They make like these commercial style blocks that even if you're not on a commercial level, you could have multiple plants in one thing, and like basically little water drippers run into each one. Kind of reminds me a little of the NFT or nutrient film technique, often shown in like trailer park boys and a lot of Canadian growers and even a lot of people here in the US did it. They had like the PVC pipes that were kind of slightly angled on the side, and they had a bunch of holes cut in the top for the plants to grow out of. And they usually use rock wool in those situations. And you could use a slab or you can use individual cuts to drop them in there. And they basically, it was like a recircling DWC almost in a sense, or like a flood and drain table run water in the that would plant, giving the plant nutrient, and then it would cycle off. So interesting techniques and options out there. I'm curious if you guys have any other thoughts of potential possible medias that maybe we haven't covered so far.
The only one I can think of off the top of my head would be aeroponics, which is kind of like, picture one of those cloners, those aeroponic cloners, and but growing the whole cycle that way, where you're spraying the roots. And that's just another step past the deep water culture, because now you have a higher rate of oxygen and better gas exchange. And but again, it's like that race car analogy, right? So you can grow, you get exponential growth and some yields, but you could also go right in the wall pretty quick and have disaster with nutrient burn, things like that, or microbe loads, uh, especially fungal. They could go crazy quick. So there's so many things you got to keep perfect.
Similar to that, I saw something marketed as fog ponics, and they have those little like atomizers. I think Brandon made a humidifier out of one of them once. Like you can sit them in water and it turns the water into like a steam or like a mist. Well, you put a bunch of those. They're pretty much DIY rigs that I've seen so far. But like think about those black and yellow totes that you can get that people always use for cannabis. You like drill holes in the top and then you put the little cups that you would use for like any DWC or hydro system. And on the bottom, you have water in the bottom. Motorcycle just revved by, but there's water in the bottom, and then you have these little fog things that shoot water out and turn it into a fog. So fog builds within the chamber, and it's sort of like an in-between what Spartan was just talking about, where it's spraying a mist on it and sitting in a complete pool of water, because fog is sort of like almost maximum like RH, like 99%, whatever, it's like being in a cloud. So it's an interesting system. I've never actually personally tried it. I've seen it a few times, so I thought I would mention it. But I think we've covered pretty much all of the different basic medias that you can grow in, and some of the positives and negatives.
Yeah, like I don't know if you talked about it before I got here, but Bingus and a couple other people growing straight up perlite.
I did mention it, but
Okay.
none of us have done that. But I will
No,
say
I
there's
haven't done
also
that
a
either.
commercial grow called like the Sunday Goods on Canacribs, where there's this Dutch grower. I think he is part of some seed company, but he grows it in Arizona, and they have little tubs of perlite, and it's just pure perlite, start to finish. And it's from going back to what Spartan mentioned at the beginning about sterilization. They sterilize that perlite every time. If anything grows on it, it's super easy to clean, super easy to reuse, and
Well, the Heppy
consistent.
bucket style too. Remember that? That was like a almost like a sip, take on a sip, but with the same kind of idea what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, so explain that a little bit more for people that aren't familiar, because hempy buckets are effective.
Yeah, they're a mix, I believe, of vermiculite and perlite to wick that water up and hold water. But that's pretty much all it was. And then you would feed your nutrient solution in the bottom 20% or something of that bucket. The bucket was literally a bucket, a 5 gallon bucket. And so like the bottom 20% of it, you might have a hole for an overflow, but your roots would go down through there and the water, the nutrients and everything would be wicked up and the roots would get chased down to the water and it works a lot like a sip container. You water through the top and away you go. But yeah, those were popular and that's not even new. That's been some pretty old school at this point, pro technique.
I love old school tech because guess what?
It's,
It
it
often
works.
works. It works. So the old school shit is often very effective, and I'm a big fan of that. Something that I just saw being reintroduced, and I might have mentioned this last week, and forgive me if I did, but borax being used for like IPM, people talking about like treating fleas on their animals, and that's something that is not commonly thought about, but it's been around forever. It's also can you be used in your laundry, and there's a whole bunch of different uses for it. And Jack will start talking about turkey any opportunity you get, but you can use it to preserve turkey tail as well. So borax has many, many uses. And interesting thing, it's cheap. It also comes in a compostable cardboard box. And this is not a borax ad, but I went down a little bit of the borax rabbit hole, and it's kind of a cool long history of a product out there. And had to make my little IPM and turkey drop, at least in this episode, a little bit. So there's that for today. But yeah, I think it's interesting to know all the different media, and the Hempy bucket is a really cool style. And I think Perlite is actually sort of operating as a Hempy bucket style in the situations that we've seen with Bingus and others, where the water and the nutrients sort of sits in the bottom and it provides aeration up in the top, and the plants throw roots out through the gaps and they make it work. I mean, you've seen plants grow in cracks in the ground. I've seen plants grow through the posts of stop signs up all the way through the stop sign and sprout up top. So plants are resilient, and when given an opportunity to survive, especially with like we're really sort of babying them and spoon feeding them in a lot of the situations where you're giving them the exact nutrient recipe that you're supposed to, the exact pH, the exact water temperature, or at least you're trying to and optimizing to the best of your abilities. And if they start to look like they're not so happy, you can give them a little more, a little bit less, change some of the pH ranges. I think a lot of times, something we didn't necessarily talk about with or like the synthetic side, regardless of media, is I think pH matters a lot more on that side of things. Because if you look at the ranges that nutrients are available to be uptaken, sometimes you might be giving a shit ton of nitrogen or calcium or magnesium, but if your pH is 7, it's just not necessarily all going to be available. You need to be in the right range for the right media. And cocoa, I think, has a different right range than soil. So things to consider. And I also think something we didn't necessarily mention in the cocoa category is I do think it's a little bit uh, it messes with the calcium, I think. So you have to be considerate. Make sure you just provide enough calcium. Like, not saying that you need to go buy a CalMag thing and over nutrient your plant, but just make sure that whatever recipe or regime you have is the cocoa one, or it's one that provides an adequate amount of calcium. Or, in my opinion, get one that has a diverse amount of calcium, because there's not just one calcium out there, there's like six. And just like we do in the soils, giving it lots of different options, or whatever different Brandon could probably better tell you that all the different types of calciums and the specific names. But whether it's soil or hydro, you want to, I think, give multiple forms, because the plant uses different ones at different times and in different situations. So when there's a drought, one might be more preferred, or when there's this or that, like all of them are important for different reasons. I'll say that. And maybe Brandon, can you speak a little bit to that, the different forms of calcium or the different forms of different nutrients? Because I know that there's multiple that are like that in organic and the synthetic side of things. Hopefully Brandon's still with us and just trying to get that mute button. But if he's not, I'm generally curious, so chat, we'll see what you have to say, or if anybody else on the panel has any thoughts on that general topic about, hopefully I didn't cut out or something, but the different forms of calciums or things like that.
I agree with you. I like to do, at least on the organic side of thing, I like to have different forms of calcium, especially on my reamendments. Um, I have, let me see, usually I could go between crab shell, oyster shell. Um, what else you got? There's one that's,
Gypsum.
yeah,
Gypsum has good calcium
gypsum is good.
and
I like
magnesium.
gypsum even during the like the flower cycle, because it doesn't really fuck with the pH too much. But it's a good
Yeah.
way to add some calcium.
The calcium silica is really good too, because it'll bring in a little iron and magnesium and calcium and silica. There's oyster shell flour is one. Also, bone meal will bring calcium. High calcium rock phosphate has calcium. So there's a lot of different events that can potentially bring in calcium. But when it comes to just like single inputs, my go-to are calcium silica and gypsum.
Love both. And what about on the hydroponic side of things? Do you have thoughts on, is there different forms of like calciums and nitrogens as well there?
Usually, in nutrient solutions, it's going to either be CalNit, calcium nitrate, it's going to be or calcium chloride are usually the things that are used in hydroponic nutrients.
That's why I think the product that's called CalMag has some nitrogen in it, because I think it's a cal it. And so a lot of people think they're just adding calcium and magnesium because it's literally just says CalMag on the bottle. But if you read the actual recipe and everything, they're adding maybe sometimes more nitrogen. As a
Yeah,
newer
it's a lot.
cocoa grower, I gave too much nitrogen because of that. My AB provided plenty of nitrogen, and then everything else I threw at it was giving more nitrogen, and then CalMag just made the recipe even worse. So learn from my mistakes. Don't be that moron gardener. Sometimes there's plenty of it there, and my issue was more other things, not that there wasn't enough nutrients. It was watering practices not being proper, or temperature and humidity not being dialed in, actually more so than anything. The environment was way out of whack. So that can actually throw your plants more so than the media. So that is something that maybe we could talk a little bit about, because your boy Jack apparently is outdoing 99% of Vivo Sun growers out there, because I just got a report from my little grow hub, and it says your garden is better than 99% of our other gardeners. And I'm like, well, it's just seedlings, so don't get too hyped up over here, Vivo Sun. Don't gas me up too much. I barely have a few nodes on these seedlings, so don't gas me up too much. But my inherent environment in San Diego, California in the summertime floats around where cannabis likes to be really happy in veg, between like 70 and 80 degrees, 50 to 70% relative humidity. So my system's barely working at all. Like I usually look at it gives me a little readout of what level the fan is at. And it's like level 1, level 2, level 1, level 2. The highest I've seen it on was level like 4 or 5 on like some of the hottest days. And it's never gotten above 82 degrees, I think, is the worst, the hottest it's gotten. And my hottest days of summer, so not to say that it's the outside temperature, but in my tent currently. So um, I'm really happy with my current environmental controls. And like I've mentioned in the past, I kind of just use, like right now, I've got my slider a little bit open, and I'm actually a little breezy. I've got a fan on me on level 1, and I'm actually feeling chilly. So I should probably turn the fan off. But with that being said, the plants are nice and happy. I've looked at the environmental conditions over there, so they're super thrilled. So I'm curious if you guys have any things that you've found pros or cons with in terms of environmentals in controlling them, because I know one that I'll say a con is I buy those cheap little 6-inch clip fans, and I know after a grow or two they're just going to explode because they're cheap, shitty plastic, and they'll stop working. Thankfully, they've never caught fire. I will say that they're not, like, in my opinion, a major fire hazard, but more than being a fire hazard, they'll just fall apart because they're made out of the cheapest, shittiest plastic possible. And so eventually the clip or the um, cover for the blade will break. So I'd say that's a con in terms of environmental controls. And I'm a quality is cheaper in the long run guy, so I need to invest and find one that will actually be like maybe a metal face and not fall apart after one run. But Spartan, any thoughts on environmental controls and some positives and negatives that you've come across in your time getting things dialed in?
Well, you bring up a great one with the plastic fans, and it's a huge step when you go from a plastic to a metal fan in cost too. That's fucking huge. You can't find a metal fan that's fucking even in the fucking same neighborhood of those cheap, like you're saying, those cheap little. You can find those a small little metal fan for like $20 maybe, but it's not going to be worth a damn for a motor on it. So, but if you do save up some money, that's one thing that a lot of people skimp on is the fans. And if you really want to pimp out your grow, that's an investment I think that just keeps on paying for itself just out of not having to replace it. Right. Like the metal, I even saw this in the commercial too. Is like the metal fans 100% lasted way the hell longer than the plastic fans, by leaps and bounds. And they seem to move better air. I think that the plastic maybe flexes a little bit as it spins, whereas the metal doesn't tend to flex as much. I don't know, my opinion. And then
No, I think that's true.
and then for like the other types of fans, like the duct fans, I was always a huge adapter of the no, I'm not gonna be able hyper fan, I think is what it's called. It's like a blue fan because it always had the basically what I call a dimmer switch on it from the get-go, and it was like a DC a DC dimmer, I believe, so that it's
Speed
like
controller. I looked it up because the other day I was like, what's the difference between that and like an amplifier and like all these other electronic devices? There's like a different word for every single one of them. Like on a
yeah.
HPS, it's called one thing. On LED, it's called one thing. On a, you know, record player, it's called one thing for your speaker or whatever. So it is funny enough, it's called a speed controller. So that was one of those things that popped
Yeah,
into
speed
my
control, that's what it's
Google
called.
searching.
But that's a good one because that DC allows you to the speed actually will reduce as you reduce it like per small increment. So you can really dial in that speed that you need and not really overconsume energy if you're really trying to be tight. And it also this less on the power that you're running, it tends to be the quieter as well. So you get the benefit of both saving power and being quieter. So just with my mind on fans, that's what the first two that come to mind of the environmental is those two things. And I believe those hyper fans are still available. I haven't had to replace one in forever. So that's another good thing is that they seem to last for a long time. And I have some that just have been running constantly. I've actually replaced like I like to have at least one fan up high above the plants, moving the air above the plants, and then several fans at least below kind of cycling air around because all your CO2 is going to fall in your room. And if you have floor fans, you kind of kick that CO2 back up toward the plants. And I think it's always super important to do that. Well, I usually just had these cheap floor fans, like a box fan, which are garbage. Those cheap plastic box fans, they barely move air. And I've been upgrading. I've got some metal fans down there, but I've used duct fans just like that fan I was just describing, whatever the hell I called it. I've already forgotten. But I've just set one of those straight on the ground. And
The vortexes or
yep, exactly. Straight on the ground, facing one way to push the air, pull air from one end of the room and pull it to the other side, and it works great.
they do work great. I've seen a lot of people do that, and I've seen even really clever systems where people put plastic bags on them, like a tubing, and they run that through the under canopy, and then they poke holes where the different plants are
They
in
look
different
radiator.
sizes to get different airflows. And it's like that was one of the most genius fucking things I'd ever seen. I was like, wow, because these fans are hyper efficient. They last forever. My VivoSun one that was cheap. It was like I got it because it was the cheap one, and now like my newer one is a little bit Gucci because it, like you were talking about, I could turn it down when I don't. The quietness, I have a silencer on it to like aid in it. It's right next to my living room couch. Like we have enough space, but it's just boom right here in my tent, and you can't hear it at all. Like it is fucking silent, and it is because it's running from 1 to 2 most of the time. And even when it's on a 5, it's really nice to have that quietness. But using it as a internal grow thing is something I see underutilized. I would say probably less than a dozen times out of the thousands of growers that I follow and interact with have I seen somebody use one of those, and they're so much more efficient in terms of how much air they move. If anything, you could dial it way back and still get great use, especially if you start of like, even if you just did like a little L duct out and had it split kind of two directions, like sat it in the corner and shot one beam that way and one beam that way. It would just kind of get a little vortex going through your tent. So I've got that as my like exhaust style with the L where it's splitting into the veg and to the flower area. And it's keeping things super dialed. So I think great, great recommendation there, Spartan Grown. And I'm curious if Noah the Grower, you've got some environmental control over there. You've got a lot of stuff set up, and I love your setup and checking all that stuff out. What are some of the best of the best and some of the worst investments and things that you've made when you got your setup going over there in terms of trying to control the environment?
Well, that's a tough one. I guess probably the mini split. That was what really kind of set it apart when I was running 6,000 watts. And ironically, now that I'm running two, it's almost a little bit overkill. I often wonder if maybe if I was just put like a higher, like a 12,000 BTU like window unit in, if I couldn't, especially obviously in the winter, I could get away with that. But in the summer, it's just like, I don't know. I'm torn about it. Getting the right dehumidifiers. Great point by Spartan about having fans underneath the canopy. That's always something that I've been a huge fan of. I like the ones blowing above it. I do the exact same thing. But getting your humidity right, I live in the Pacific Northwest, so we have a lot of humidity around here. So getting your dehumidifiers game on point is one that I do. So I did bring this up on a previous show, but I'll bring it up again. I like to buy my dehumidifiers from Home Depot and buy the 3-year warranty on it because mine are just going to be running nonstop for those 3 years. So it's like $8, $9. You get, three, you're guaranteed it for 3 years. So I've only had to replace one, but I mean, it kind of, in the first one you replace, it pays for itself. I
Well, that's huge
have,
peace of mind
yeah,
too.
yeah, exactly. It really is. Cause I had one, I actually won a contest at the local grocery store and won one and it went out fairly quickly. It was an Ideal Air, and it went out. I think it went out in like a year and a half, and it was warranted for a year. So it's basically just trash. And I've had two go out. Like I said, one of them was from Home Depot. They replaced it, and I have a couple. I have one that I think has been going for about 3 or 4 years. So, but yeah, dehumidifiers, obviously getting your cooling, and then ironically, sometimes in like a really big freeze, like, I'll just turn the exhaust fan off, and then turn the mini split off, and then that will just kind of, heat the room too. So you can kind of just dial it in a little bit, but air AC, high quality air AC. My Ideal Air mini split I've had running for 10 years, no problems with it. My Daikin that I have in my house has gone out of me twice. And right now we are in like the middle of like for us, a huge heat wave. It's almost 100 degrees 3 days in a row. And of course, as soon as I can get the guy out to come out here and do a deep clean on this thing is after that. And it's just, but that Ideal Air, 3 years ago when they installed this one, the guy had the guys look at it and they're like, yeah, that thing's probably gonna go tits up anytime. Just keeps going nonstop. Pre-charged 36,000 BTU Ideal Air nonstop. So some stuff you can get from certain places you can get pretty good, that'll last you. So I'm always afraid. Like I said, I think if it goes out, I'm just gonna put in a window unit. So rant over.
Oh, all good, man. I asked. I'm glad that you spilled the tea or spilled the beans, whatever it is, You let people know the good stuff. And I will say, if you're on the larger side of things and you have the option when you're setting up, if you're getting something new, um, I've been seeing and hearing a lot of really good things about reheat. If you can add a reheat modification to your AC unit, it can really drive down the need and use on the dehumidifiers that you're running because a lot of air conditioning units have these reheat coils that can basically pull your AC essentially acts as your dehumidifier. It can do that naturally, but people like Noah in Pacific Northwest or in Florida, where it gets super damp already, and you're really working hard and extra against that. It's what they use in like swimming pools and stuff like that. And a lot of the large commercial grows are using those reheat systems. So it's something worth considering if you're on the larger side of things. If you're on a smaller scale home grow and not scaling it up to like your garage or building out a room or something, it probably won't impact you. But it is something to maybe have in your back pocket that could save you a little bit in the long run because most people actually don't know about it or consider it from. There's a guy I think who basically makes his entire uh, thing doing hooking up those reheat units, Cannabis Mechanical. I see him out there hooking people up with them all the time, and it's like the exception, not the rule, that people have them. So, and in our industry, there's a lot of moisture to handle in most situations. So unless you're in like Arizona or super dry areas, and even then, Arizona gets the monsoons. So every place has their different situations that they have to deal with. Curious if Brandon Russ has any thoughts on some places where you've had some good wins in terms of environmental regulation, and then some things that didn't necessarily pay off.
I mean, my indoor is pretty regulated. I have a Quest dehumidifier. I've got an AC in there. Everything stays like where it's supposed to. So my temperatures don't really fluctuate. Um, Outdoor right now we're dealing with a lot of heat, so plants are a little stressed. But as soon as it starts cooling back down, they'll be good.
And I seen on Instagram, those are trees.
Dude, 13, 14 foot plants right now in the backyard, dude. It's
Yeah,
gnarly.
dude.
I seen
saw
that. I
post.
seen that.
It's like for size reference, and he jumps down, and the things are like
Yeah.
twice the size of him. I'm like,
And he
oh,
disappears.
snap.
He
Yep.
completely disappears behind it.
Oh yeah. And that's all in my native soil, which is really poor soil, but man,
That's
I'm
what I was
telling
gonna
you,
say on the media. There's one native soil.
you can grow in
I'll
any
say this, dude. I don't believe in this whole poor soil conspiracy. Fucking every single spot in this country that people had land and farmers sat down and developed it, it went from deserts to green. If you do it, there's greenhouses in Arizona in the middle of the fucking desert. Like you're saying, someone like Brandon who is putting good stuff in there year after year after year. Look at what he's growing now in his native soil. His native soil is now, probably been benefit from a lot of Bokashi earthwork inputs over the
Oh,
years. And so it's not your you know, normal Oklahoma
It's
soil that you're gonna
amended,
move into a
yeah.
house, but it is on his
Brandon
native land,
adjusted.
you know, and it becomes your native soil, and you make that area your own sort of terroir, which is beautiful. Every winery does it. Every, you know, farm builds their own organic situation, whether they're quote unquote organic or not, because all the different inputs that go into it.
Yeah, my soil has been built up over the last couple years. So before it was pretty much sand. It's still pretty sandy, but now it's got all the good stuff in it.
Having animals like was it a horse? I can't remember, but having the animals to be able to add organic material is a huge help with that too.
Yeah, I don't have the horse anymore. Horse went out
Oh, damn.
70-acre farm to run around with other horses.
Well, that's cool.
But yeah, I mean, most of that stuff, chicken manure, horse manure, all that stuff is usually just used for, I compost it, put it in the compost pile, and sometimes I pull compost out of there to put on the garden veggies and stuff like that.
It's much better composted. Fresh, it's really hot. So composting it, I think, makes it a better amendment for use in most everyday gardens out there. Um, you could even vermicompost it, but I think general compost would probably be the way to go. The Some of the best, I would say the best commercial vermicompost that I've ever gotten is from dairy manure. They feed it dairy manure from an organic dairy farm, and it comes out very consistent. Same, like they test it every 2 months, microbial levels, NPK levels, like it's very consistent. It almost comes out like coffee grounds. It's flow through beds, the Terravesco stuff. I'm about to pick up another bag of it soon because I'm out and it's fantastic. And uh, I have a little recipe I call my Plumeria love potion that I give to all my friends who grow plumerias, and it always gets them blooming. So part of that is the worm casting stuff. So I think that is part of the magic in a lot of growing good flowers, whether it's plumeria or cannabis. Uh, Vermicompost, high quality stuff. I think it's got more benefits than I can even mention because they're so long, it's hard to remember all of them. But somebody also mentioned earlier, and I mentioned it was Stangman. Shout out to Stangman. The fucking what's it called when you
Insect frags.
reinvent insect frass? There you go, Spartan Drone,
Yeah.
remembering for me. That's one I use on transplants, and I think you might have recommended that, Spartan, is the insect frass on the transplant, and that's also got a bunch of benefits to it. But a huge fan of that amendment in organic or modified grow mixes.
Yeah, what got me doing that was the chitin that's in it. It kind of helps with the plant signal molecules, hopefully, right? To sense this chitin is present and to maybe attract the right microbes that make chitinase. This melts chitin. That's gonna fuck up those kinds of insects. But there's also like an NPK to it. It's low, but it's that there is NPK to it. There is nutrition there.
It's my least favorite smelling input, so be very careful when you're. I have a spoon that I dedicate to that bag, and I close it in there with it, and I just give a little dash of it when I'm transplanting. But I will say, shout out to Flora Horrors. He mentioned that cannabis is like hybrid carnivorous. I had one time an ant crawled on my plant, and maybe there wasn't enough chitinase in there because it fucking fried this ant. It got caught in the resin, and it just like melted this thing, dude. It was absolute total destruction. Ant didn't stand a chance. So fuck that ant. Plucked it off that little section of leaf, and my plant lived on happily. So really interesting to see that kind of stuff. But that is a great input in my opinion. And there's lots of other benefits as well. Just if you read into like benefits of those inputs, there's lots of them. So as this is a kind of growth media episode, I think talking about different inputs is interesting to do. But that being said, I something I will admittedly say I'm not the most familiar with, and it's not an ad, but you've definitely dedicated an hour and a half to hanging out with us, Brandon. So I want to know a little bit more about the humates because that's the only thing I haven't really used from Bokashi Earthworks. So, like, what exactly is the K humate, N humate, all that different stuff? Like, um, it does it qualify as organic? Why is it bottled versus is there K or N humate powder out there that I could be top dressing? Do you offer something like that as well? So just maybe tackle a couple of those questions if you're able to.
Sure. Yeah, it's a liquid formulation because to extract all of the human fulvic acid and the nutrient ions out of the mineral, it has to be processed. So it's micronized and then it's solubilized, and then the humic and fulvic acids are separated. And then a catalyst is used to stabilize all of the elements with the humic and fulvic acid. But it's immediately available. I don't register anything for organic because it's a lot of just bureaucracy and it just tons of money and stuff. And I just don't do it. I don't think anybody who use it really cares either, because when they use it, you're seeing things like mushrooms develop in beds. You're seeing the biostimulating effect of it, aside from it being a NPK fertilizer. But it's immediately soluble, so you don't have to wait for nutrition. That's one of the things that Spartan mentioned earlier. If he ever feels like, oh, I need to hit it with something, you hit it with humates, and you're going to see an immediate result. The only other thing that we have are like the top dress amendment. So we have the Bloom top dress amendment, and that is actually made from coffee compost and sunflower hull ash. And that's a complete fertilizer. It has NPK, secondary, and micronutrients as well. The top dress amendment is like an agglomerated nutrient, so it's basically a meal that's been pelletized with essentially molasses. So it acts as a biostimulant as well because it's adding carbohydrate to the soil along with the nutrient. But that's more geared for like a slow nutrient release, while the humates are like immediately available.
It's really good stuff. I'm definitely gonna consider which ones to pick up because I'm about to reorder another bottle of the Micro Plus. I've still got lots of Calcium Plus and Amino N Plus and lots of the other products that I enjoy. But the thing that like I said, haven't tried is the Micro Plus, or not the Micro Plus, the Humates. And something I
Yeah,
was a little bit resistant on
amazing.
was just, although Micro Plus comes in a bottle, and I love that. And I know that you have the spores as well, but
Yep.
the bottle thing, like one of the reasons I moved away from um, the growing in cocoa was the system that I preferred actually happened to be a bottled system. The simplicity of it, it was cost not economic, but I also just didn't like. I don't think plastic is really recyclable. We could get into all that, but it's pretty much, in my opinion, not being recycled, even if you put it in the right bins. So I wanted to avoid bottles as much as I can, and so cutting them out. But the thing is, the products that I got from you have lasted so long. Like I use just a little bit and it lasts such a long time that I'm not going to beat myself up over a bottle that I might have for several years and have it continue to work. How is the shelf life on those types of products? Is there any worry about, oh no, I might buy too much and then it's going to go bad on the shelf, or do they last for years
Like,
or
so, several years. You just want to make sure they're out of direct sunlight and that they're in like a room temperature environment. You don't want them to get really hot or in cold or like fluctuate temperatures, stuff like that. But yeah, they last for really long time. And like you said before, they're really efficient. So you're not using a lot. Like the humate fertilizers, like my last two runs, I did a couple of applications throughout the thing. This last run, I didn't do any, because what happens with those humates is it'll actually create availability with what's already in your media as well. So it's not just delivering the nutrients, but creating better solubility across everything that's in your media. And so when you start using it, you see higher nutrient levels across the board, and those translate. So it's like you don't need a lot because it's super efficient and it's all metabolically available, as opposed to like the 15 or 20% use efficiency that salt has. All of these the carbon chelated nutrition stays in a metabolically available form that's not just accessible to the plant, but biology has access to it as well. And so everything that you're putting in there, it stays in there. It doesn't, create precipitation reactions. It doesn't convert into different molecules. It all just stays exactly as what it's supposed to be so the plant can access it.
it is interesting because similarly, humic and fulvic acids, I think, make uh, modified growing mixes a little bit more efficient. And sometimes people can be a little bit surprised by how little they need to amend and how much might be uptaken sometimes. And it might be some of the only times that I've actually seen people burn plants in organic because they gave humic and fulvic acids in a super hot soil. And it went from being okay to when they gave that humic and fulvic the next few days, it looked almost like when you see a organic or a cocoa plant that got given a little bit too much nutrient. So I was like, what's going on? What did you give to it? And ultimately ended up being just the humic and fulvic acids, I think, pushed it over the top. But thankfully, just watering it, plain water for a while, got it back to where it needed to be. I think Spartan had mentioned in the past in terms of not using necessarily a bunch, maybe using it once a week or even once a run in certain aspects. So maybe you could speak a little bit more to how you go about using it in your system, Spartan.
Yeah, it's I mean the name can be a little bit deceiving, I suppose. If you look at like for example N-humate and you think it's just nitrogen, it's not. They're all like a complete nutrient, but it's focused a little more N heavy. It's for veg or maybe the first part of flower, first week or two. But he's also got the what's it called? What's the middle one called? There's an N.
Complex.
Oh yeah, yeah. That complex one is just a mix of the first of the other two. So it's like half N, heavy, and then half
It's an even
K.
distribution of NPK in the complex, and then the K is the high potassium formula.
Yeah, so basically I just depending on each one for me in my head is for a different type, different time in the grow. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm seeing a nutrient deficiency. I'm gonna go, oh, what am I in? I'm in veg. Okay, I'm gonna grab the N. Oh, I'm in late flower. Oh, I'm gonna grab the K. You know what I mean? If I'm not in too late flower, I wouldn't want to use it, last week
Yeah.
or two.
Yeah. Usually I'm not watering humates past usually, 3 or 4 weeks. You know, I don't I'm usually leaving about 3 or 4 weeks of just nothing, at the end.
A
So
true water only flush, kind of.
I mean, yeah, but the thing is too, like when the humans are super efficient. So if I'm running my beds, I'm typically not using three applicate. I'm typically not using more than three applications through the whole cycle. So I might hit them once with the N in veg. I might hit them with in transition with the complex. Then I'm gonna hit them once in flowering. But like this last run, I didn't do any humates because it was already sufficient. So um, there's people that
So if
I
you
know
harvest
that'll
at week
use it.
9, week 6 is when you're cutting off or
Yeah,
earlier.
or 5. Yeah, usually week 5.
Okay.
Um, but the cool thing is like this. So there are many different ways that people are using them. So some people are using them as like supplemental feeding in their living soil. Some people are using them where they're using it more frequently, but the amount that they are using are less. So some people are running it in cocoa, but they'll do a couple of milliliters every watering instead of 30 milliliters every 2 weeks. There's other people that are mixing in like 5 to 8 milliliters per gallon and then mixing in their base salts, but they're decreasing by 50%. And so there's different ways that you can use it because it's compatible with other lines and other products, and it increases the use efficiency of what's being added to. So if you're combining it with, let's say, a nutrient salt, you can't go full strength there because what happens is all of those nutrient ions from the salts are being bonded to the humic and fulvic acids, and so it creates better use efficiency. So you don't need as much because the plant has access to it, and it's not precipitating, it's not bonding with phosphorus isn't bonding with calcium or micronutrients or whatever. And so what it does is it makes it so you can use less of those salt-based fertilizers. Usually up you can decrease up to 60% if you're using humate.
Yeah, I'm really a big fan. In my grow, it's like I said, it's sitting on my shelf and it's like the oh shit, my reamendment wasn't good enough or whatever I'm planting is using, it's running out of nutrients sooner than I thought. I'm reaching for it, like depending where we're at in the grow, I'm reaching for that and it's gonna get up to 30 milliliters that feeding. And I'm just gonna feed like normal after that, just straight water again. And that's usually all I need is just one dose of whatever it is to solve the problem.
Yeah,
Well, and as
and
a
it
pheno hunter,
crushes
it's
with
nice to be able to. Some stuff is a little bit heavier feeding, and some stuff likes it light. So I tend to dial my soil a little bit light, and then I could have options like that, where if you have something that wants a little bit more, you can give it to it pretty fast, and then know moving forward, okay, this one likes a little bit heavier X, Y, or Z. And I like trying to learn to dial in plants, whether it's how much water they take or how much nutrient they prefer, because I think that little stuff is where you edge out from like a 8 to a 9 or a 9 to a 10 in terms of quality. And having those tools in your tool belt allows you to be more flexible in the garden. And like you were saying, if your top dress didn't do it, sometimes the top dress might take a few days up to a whole week, I think, sometimes to really cycle in properly, depending on how well it's scratched in or how much it's micronized. So organic at going back to the whole media conversation, times can seem slow paced if you don't have these tools. So it's nice to
You know what's
have access, and
another
not to be like
thing too
a
about
shill for Bokashi Earthworks alone, but there's like BioBiz and there's other organic products out there. So I'm not trying to just say like Brandon's the only buddy who has something that has a quote like organic style to it, that's immediately available from a bottle that will be able to get your, because I've seen people use that and have a lot of success with that as well. So there
I
are
agree with you, but I
multiple,
will go
like I
on
said, just like
record.
there's multiple medias.
Look, Jack, this is how you say it though. Like I'll say that there's other options out there, but I only say there's one option that's Spartan Grown approved, and that's for Bokashi Earthworks. Because I've
well,
tried that. It's in my garden
I would
right
agree.
now. I could walk in my garden
And
right
I
now
only
and you'd
recommend
see
stuff
that
I've
still.
used.
they
And I
work
haven't,
super efficiently in small pots too. So that's one of the things that so many people have told me. They're like, yo, I didn't want to, I was just in solo cups and I didn't want to transplant. So I hit them with some humates and it kept them happy. Or people are growing in smaller volume pots, doing it organically and still maintaining, proper nutrition because they have something that is soluble and available.
I can attest to that.
damn, you just
I've
sold me.
had plants in too small of pots that needed to be put, I hadn't made the decision. Am I keeping this or am I going to plant this into a bigger pot? And I was able to just extend that by weeks by just giving it a little splash of some fucking humate and as watering, and it was enough to, make them look better and grow a little bit. And I was like, wait a minute, chill.
Well, you just sold me because I've got a bunch of plants and solo cups, and a couple of them are going to get sex tested here pretty soon, being the Vortex, shout out Spartan, Project VF2s, and all the other ones are feminized. So that'll make it pretty easy what sex those are going to be.
Yeah,
And but
Have you
I'm going to
guys
let them
seen
veg
yeah.
for a little while in the solo cups.
Actually, Jack, last week we were talking with Seed Person, and you recommended that he get the humate fertilizer from Brandon, and I saw his IG post. He got it, so that's pretty cool. He already,
Shout out to Seed
yeah,
Person.
Oh
he
yeah,
already,
yeah. I spoke to him on IG. Actually, dude, you just mentioned you're sex testing your plants. Have you guys seen that post about that spray that's supposed to interact with the plant hormones to create like an illuminary effect when you shine a certain type of light on it, so you can determine whether or not your plants are male and female?
No, but that would be dope if it were true.
So here's the thing, dude.
yeah, fellas.
My marketing director saw the ad and he sent it to me and he's like, what do you think, dude? And then we started researching it on with AI and it sounded legit. Like it's the mode of action, the way it works is it uses like this spray that interacts with like either the ethylene and the gibberellin and then the cytokinin and the auxin, because I guess the female and male plants produce different ratios. And so when you spray it and then you shine this certain light on it, one of them will illuminate a certain color than the other, so you can determine sex without having to get a genetic test. So we're gonna do a little more research into it, and if it's something that we can put together, I'm gonna do a test on it and see how legitimate it is.
That's dope, especially
I'd
on
love to
Yo,
see
age.
that.
Like how
how
mature does
early?
the
It's
plant
gonna
have to
be,
be to
yeah,
start
it's gonna
making
have to
I'll
those
be.
tell you
hormones?
this, 110% stand
Uh,
behind the fucking sex test that you can cut a little bit of the leaf from when it's the first set of leaves, you can send a little snip and they'll get 99 out of 100 of them right. I'll say that. So,
Yeah.
if not 100%.
Yeah, but you gotta wait for that, Jack. I don't want to wait. I want to know right now.
But wouldn't it be
That's true.
cool if just you went in there, you sprayed your whole garden down, and then you went in there with like your
a
special
certain light.
UV or whatever, and you're just shining light on your plants, and you're like, Oh,
The
that one's
purple.
yellow, it's male. Oh, that one's pink, it's female.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be dope.
That would be cool. Not gonna lie. I would wonder
Yeah.
how much it's gonna cost me and how accurate is it? Because if I find out it's like 75% accurate and I called a bunch of females, I'm pissed. Because I actually kept, I probably told this story in the past. My first time I got 12 out of 15 male. And so I had 3 females. And I was like, dude, there's no way all of these are males. And I flowered all 12 males, and all 12 of them were fucking males. I sealed the entire chamber, shut it, and just turned the light on 12-12. And I was like, I'm gonna see if these are males. Oh shit, Brandon's in the garden. We're getting the spotlight. And I think Noah said he's gonna go in the garden later too. So
I'm gonna try to
good times.
switch my
Oh,
camera around. Hold
I think
on.
his connection might cut out, but we're already getting the idea.
Hold on. Let me try to flip my camera around. Oh, here it is. Right there. There we go. Why isn't it doing it? Flip my camera. There we go.
Maybe stand like on your patio and talk and point, because I think you're gonna lose your connection if you walk over there.
I don't know if you guys can see all those, but
Turn your camera to the side. Hold it like a. All right, perfect. Dude, it looks like a forest.
yeah, I mean, I trimmed all the bottoms pretty big, so there's probably like 4 feet of nothing on the bottom of there,
It is a forest.
and then about 10 feet of plant.
That's wild, dude. I love this so much.
Bro, you put a lot of work into trimming that. Holy shit. From that last video where you were walking into it to now. Wow.
Well, here's the thing.
What'd you use? Scissors or hacksaw?
Well, you know what I'm doing right now for you guys? I've got a couple of plants that are actually male. So I cut them down. I actually have clones of all these. But what I'm doing is like right here, I have the Chemdog Cross the Black Lime Reserve male. So I'll collect some pollen and I'll put it in my little pollen applicator. This thing right here. And I'll go selectively hit those. A lot of what's out there is not going to, it's only, I'm making seeds because I'm doing all those plants that are out there are also in my indoor right now, and tomorrow I'm flipping them. So I'll be flowering all of the same phenotypes indoor and outdoor so I can cross reference for my selection process.
Did you ever consider building a fucking massive ass greenhouse? I know you guys get some crazy ass winds out there, but fucking just throw a giant ass hoop house up, bang
In
some
my
rebar
yard.
in, bend some PVC.
I do. I have a hoop house. In fact, if you guys can maybe show you guys if I walk out here. I built one of those, but I use it for veggies and stuff. The reason why all my plants are back there is because they're not visible.
Oh yeah, the different laws in the different states. It can't be visible to the
But-
road or people or whatever.
Right. But yeah, well, you know what I did with my selection process is all those plants that are outdoors, I took clones of them. I took 2 clones of everything. So I've got one set of clones that are in the beds. And then I've got another set of clones that are right here in this tent. And so I'm going to actually top
About to
all
add
these.
2 new clones.
I'm about
Go
to
ahead. Sorry.
I'm gonna cut these down and just hold on to them because I just wanted to make sure I had backups. Just to make sure that when I do my selection and I figure out which ones are my keepers, I have them in there.
Awesome. Always nice to have backups. I'm gonna moving forward taking backup cuts of everything before I flower it, just in case, because I kick myself for some of the ones that I don't have. And speaking of clones, I'm getting two with the intention of using them in breeding projects moving forward, which are shout out to a former guest of the podcast, only podcast he ever came on, Josie Wales, GG4 cut. I'm getting that. And I'm also getting the Ohio Death Star cut.
Those are both
So
Oh, I'm gonna talk, Jack. I've been looking for that.
The Death Star,
I'll hook you up.
Sensi Star crossed the Sour D, I believe is
Yep.
the genetics. And I remember
That is
when
the cross.
when it first hit the scene, I think I might have saw it first maybe in like 2007 or so. But it's really loud, dude. It's I feel like it's like terpinolene dominant, but it's really, really loud.
I like it. It's good smoke for sure.
I grew up
like
But
before.
Spartan, I'll get you a cut.
I appreciate that, man. I've been trying to get that for so long for my buddy Big. That's his favorite. I had it for a long time, and before he moved here, I'd gotten rid of it and been
Have
kicking
you
myself.
grown GMO cherry pie, Spartan?
What's that?
Have you grown the GMO cherry pie, the
No,
bigot from Lime Rising Farm?
no, I haven't grown that yet.
Oh, that's fucking fantastic. If you like GMO,
We
it
do.
finishes faster. It finishes faster and it actually washes better. I like it overall. I like it more than GMO because it's got a little bit of sweetness from the cherry pie.
Okay.
It finishes a
Those are
little
two of my
faster.
favorites.
Dude,
Yeah, I'll
it's
have to. I didn't know that Nick had that. I'll have to try to get a hold of him and get some of that because that's another one that we grow a lot of GMO crosses, so that would be one right up our alley.
yeah, it's a unicorn
Cherry
of a
pie is
lawn.
so fucking fire.
It'll hit like 8% return to rosin. It's fucking puts up huge numbers.
I'm gonna be
It's
honest
really
with you, and
solid.
I'm not gonna fucking blow people's names up or whatever, but I've been pretty disappointed so far, and we've been growing a lot of, and it's I guess some of it's been a little older made now, but a lot of modern day genetics and in our pheno hunt runs, and we're just popping, finding herms here and there, and it's just like, come on. I know that they're in there for sure, and but like packs that people like now would be selling for like $400 or $500, and we're finding that same kind of thing, and it's like, what the hell is going on?
You got to do
There's been
really
reports of
good.
it for years.
Got to do good selection work.
Yep, for sure. So, but that's what we've been doing this whole time for like over a year now. We've been just doing straight pheno hunts, pheno hunts, pheno hunts, pheno hunts. But we just recently, actually just this weekend, the power officially turned on, and we got power in the second flower room. So now we just have to get a another head unit in there for the HVAC, and we'll be able to have a second room. And when that goes, that's going to be so cool to be able to to run one one strain. You know what I mean? Not 12 different phenos or 13 different phenos of the same strain, and you get like a mix. So to be able to grow a whole monocrop, even if it's just one light of the same strain and one light of another strain, that's going to be great for me just for the uh uniformity of it. It's a lot. I don't know if you guys run. I mean, I know Brandon and I know Tao have run some large pheno hunts, but that's so much work because not just to keep the clones as backup, but to literally, with your best effort, go through each one of those plants, some being very close to each other, and making that selection on which one's the best. Because in the room, it's nearly impossible. It's nearly impossible because they mix together the scents and stuff, and it's until after the dry of the flower, or maybe you harvest it for concentrate, but until you can try the end product really side by side, it's so hard sometimes to do that determination. And then like, how long has that been now? Now you're all the way up till after harvest, making a determination if you're going to keep or select something. That means you've waited all that long, keeping all these plants, these backup plants alive. 12, how many plants do you got alive? 12, 13 plants. How much effort did that take? It's a lot. It's a lot. So my hat's
It
off
is
to
a
all the
lot, but I'll
females.
say this. The truly special ones shine through in the room and afterwards. Like the dankest of the dank, the best cuts of all time, in my opinion, tend to stand out. just that little bit. You're gonna be like, damn, this. You're gonna keep going back to that one and be like, man, this one's really fucking good. And
Yeah,
then
I
it
mean,
ends
I
up being
agree with
fucking
you
good.
to a
You keep
point,
on.
but there's a lot of lookers.
yeah,
And
that's what I was
you
gonna
don't
say. I
know.
just
You
went
don't know
through
until you
that.
try it.
This one's my favorite.
The
I know this
jar
one's
is the
gonna be
ultimate
killer.
decision.
This one's gonna be killer. I know it is. And then when it's all said and done, that's like your third favorite, and the one that you thought was the shittiest is actually the best. But yeah, that sucks. And I like to grow them at least twice. I don't even like to like pick just from that. I like to grow them at least twice, grow a clone of it, and see how it does. So yeah, it's but we got a lot of good shit to choose from, so it's good going through. But yeah, like you were saying, Spartan, that's exactly what happened to me. I told you. I told the story a whole bunch of times when my got kicked out of the place that I was growing, and I talked to my buddy who was like, we were tight. I was like, dude, just hold on to these cuts for me for a little while. You didn't do it. So then when I got my own place again, he started buying me seeds because I think he felt guilty. But I was going through tons of seeds, man. He was buying me all sorts of seeds, and they were all harming out on me. I'm like, dude, this is killing me. And I have like footage of because I then that yeah, because they hide too. The male flowers hide, man. You got to really investigate.
Dude. Yeah.
So when it
You
happens,
find them at harvest, that's a little
yeah,
late.
that's yeah. Or you go in and like, why are all these hairs like
You find them at
not
harvest, you're
white
finding seeds
anymore?
later.
Why are these hairs not white anymore? What the fuck? And then you find it. Like that's the worst. But that's when I was like,
You
fuck
start
this,
telling
man.
yourself, maybe I bumped into it.
Yeah, I'm gonna use my own. I'm gonna use freaking subcool strains because I know they're not harms, and I'm gonna make my own seeds, and that's exactly basically what I did.
I'm in the same boat,
It's a
brother.
great
You know,
starting point.
I made all mine with Vortex. So shout out to Sub. He was the one that did the
Well,
work for me.
I use yeah, he's definitely shout out to Sub, but I use him as an example. If you start out with junk, you're gonna end up with junk. So you want to start out with good, reliable seeds. And I knew that yeah, Sub cool. And then my AK Bean Brains, I know he's like legit. There's certain people that I would like to look through their stuff, and if they're good,
Sub got
use them.
stuff from Brothers Grimm. Shout out Mr. Soul
Yeah,
C99.
Mr. Soul, he's
Brothers
still
Grimm
doing
seed
it.
is still making good seeds. He's hooked up with the Trailer Park Boys. That's probably one of the only celebrity brands that I actually recommend. The
Bro, he
Ricky's
not
Kush
only
or
that,
the
did you see
Bubbles, whatever.
his newest collabs with Montel Williams? He's doing
I just saw that. Shout out Montel.
yeah,
He's always been a cannabis advocate. He's had foot pain
yeah,
and all this stuff. Yeah, I've seen him speaking on TV for pro cannabis for at least 20 years. So
yeah,
shout out to Montel,
yeah.
at least for that. Can't speak to everything, but
Shout out to Brothers Grimm and Seed Person One because he sent me. I got some Brother Grimm. Here it's right here because I want to grow them. Brothers Grimm, Durban Tie times Cindy 99 back cross.
ooh, that's gonna be some good shit.
Yeah, so I'm stoked for those.
Heck yeah.
And this is also gonna be some good shit. Shout out
Oh,
to
yeah, look
Noah
at
the
this.
Grower. Got the permanent marker, maybe next to permanent marker.
He's under that West Coast sun or HPS.
Yeah.
It's
Why
always sunny and
not?
warm in the grow room. I
Yeah,
love it,
the
man. It
humidity's a little
cranks.
high right now, which is kind of a weird thing because it's dry, because that AC is cranking so high,
looking good, dude.
Yeah, it looks good, brother.
Thank you. Yeah, I got this. That right there, that's that new Chem Dog. This is the lemon tree right here, and that's that Baby Yoda. I just slammed them all in there in twos just to see, that way I could figure out whether or not the weed's any good. And it all looks and smells pretty legit. But like you said, I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not ruling anything in or out till the smoke test. So we'll see what happens.
I'm excited for that Chem Dog, man. That
Oh,
looks
yeah.
legit.
I wasn't going to do it. And Jack was like, just do it. And I was like, all right, I'm doing it.
Did my
Well,
chem
now
dog?
you
I got-
inspired me because when that lemon tree you got made me want the Ohio Death Star, and everybody loves Josie Wales GG4, and he's a legend, and he's been on the show and RIP, but I still think it's some of the best shit to this day. So I'm like, if I think that, I should get it for my garden and keep it and remind people of the gospel of fucking GG4 because it is fucking fire. So shout out to Josie. It's still in Brandon's crosses, which are actually some of the next that I'm gonna be popping. I think it's some like GG4 lime crosses that you sent me a while back. So I'm gonna try and get
What
those
were you
going.
saying about your
after,
Chem Dog
this current
strain
one.
there, Brandon?
I have some right here. It's in my little tote. It's not trimmed up yet. It's just at the process where I'm letting all the moisture from the internal parts kind of diffuse to the outer parts. But yeah, I just harvested a bunch of Chem D that I got from P-Bud, and I fucking love Chem. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so potent.
And
It's still to this day, in my opinion, some of the best smoke.
Yeah. The reason I
just-
got rid of it was way early on in my career because I didn't think the yield was good. And it was 100% my fault, I'm sure. But God, it was always awesome.
yeah, it yields pretty decent for me. The Chem Dog cross the Black Lime Reserve that's hanging in here was fucking massive.
You've been growing some massive plants for quite a while. But with that being said, we got about 1 minute to wrap it up. And I'm going to pass it over first to Spartan Grown.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you everyone on the panel. It's good to see you again, Brandon. And shout out to chat, man. It's always cool to see everybody in chat come back week after week. But other than that, much love and keep growing, everybody.
Thank you so much, Spartan. Always a pleasure having you. And next up, we got Brandon Rust.
What's going on? We are having some sales on the website. So if you go to bokashiearthworks.net, some of the bundle packs, the Micro Plus is on sale. I think the Top Dress Amendments are on sale right now. And the only other thing that we got going on moving forward is our dispensary and grow is going to be opening up hopefully in about 40 days. We got all of our approvals and everything, and we're just waiting for them to process the rest of our paperwork.
Congratulations, man. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Awesome stuff, man. Well,
That's
thank you
gotta
again
feel
for
good.
joining us.
Wait a minute.
Happy to-
Wait 1 second. That's just gotta feel great, Brandon, to walk into a place, be like, "This is my fucking dispensary. Come buy weed for legally at my shop." That's cool, dude.
A 20 lighter, and then it's just 14 lights, 2 4-light rooms, 1 6-light room for flower. We're going to be growing the same 6 things in house. It's not going to change. We're not going to be hunting for hype. It's going to be like, these are the weed, and the people that come in will be like, this is what you want. You just need
I
to
love
trust
that, dude.
Battle of the Breeders will be out of there too, where we are doing the seed pops and doing drops with different breeders. So that'll be cool too.
Good stuff, Brandon. Thank you so much for sharing. And I look forward to seeing all that unfold. And it's exciting times for sure. And next up, we got Noah the Grower.
Yeah, great show. I had a good time, always learn stuff, and it was cool going to my room, showing a little bit of stuff off. Probably be in there one more week. I think looks like it's probably got at least 8-10 days checking it out. But I'm Noah the Grower on Instagram. You'll find me here and there, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks again for joining us, Noah. Last and certainly not least of our panelists this evening is the American one.
Jack, as always, thanks for hosting. Good to see everybody on panel. Good to see everyone in chat. I am the American One on the YouTube and the American One _with _Ekeens on IG. And yeah, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. And we'll see you either next week or somewhere in between. Keep growing.
Absolutely. We'll be back next week. And you could see my information right there at Jack Greenstock. And 50strains.com is where you can find my stuff. Thank you all for coming. And we will see you next week. Cheers, everybody. Peace and love.
There you go. Hey, you